Welcome back, friends, to the next class. Today's topic is the Zodiac. We're going to be back on the board today and breaking down each sign of the Zodiac and teaching you the language of the 360-degree circle. So let's go ahead and dig in. All right, guys, so tropical astrology, which again is the topic that we are discussing in our class, starts its new year, its astrological year in the spring with the sign of Aries. I want to give you a little bit of a side note. There are a ton of different ways to study the environment, to study the sky, and different languages of astrology. Astrology is a language. It is a language that defines that which is happening in our natural environment. And this is really, really important to always remember when it comes to astrology. When it comes to any studies of the natural world, we're just discussing the language that we use to define what we see. But it's really, really important with astrology because there are so many different astrological studies in the world. There are, depending on where you go on the earth, you're going to find a different language that describes what's happening in the heavens. So I want to make sure that we are aware of that and that we keep this in our vision. You can actually also start the astrological year in the sign of Capricorn. Actually, the tarot deck is in alignment with the astrological story and starts in Capricorn. You can also even start the year or the astrological year in Sagittarius or in any sign, actually, because what we're talking about, remember, is a circle of life. And what we are doing is defining, which we're going to dig into today, what the circle needs to do in its own pattern and move and wavelength. So we are going to be in alignment with the current astrological new year, which is spring and Aries season. But I just want you to know, keep your mind open. There's no 100% truth in what I'm saying. What I'm discussing is a language that describes the truth. And so really the only truth that you can verify is the truth that you feel within your own self and what you see and what you experience. Find the language that makes sense to you and use that language to enrich your life. What I use is tropical astrology, and we start that astrological year in the spring with Aries. So that's going to be where we start. This is springtime right here. This is the beginning of spring, and our first sign of the season is Aries. So in last class, we actually wrote the definitions of the circle of life out in counterclockwise. We actually took Aries here and went around there. The zodiac and the ecliptic move counterclockwise across our sky, but the seasons move clockwise, okay? So again, remember, multiple layers interacting together like all of life. So for this, we are talking about the seasons, and we're going to be moving clockwise. So Aries starts out the cycle, and Aries is the energy that it's cardinal fire. So this is the beginning of the new fire. And if you put yourself, what I want to do is put us into a garden. And what we're going to actually do is look at each astrological sign and learn its definition, its describing, or the patterns that describe its time through the garden and through plants. That's what astrology and herbalism for everyday life is really all about, is interconnecting you with practical, real solutions that you can see yourself. I can talk to you all day about what Aries is and all the Aries people that I know and how similar they are, but it's easier for me. But I'd rather actually show you Aries in the environment, show you Aries in the garden. So let's go to the garden. And we're going to be in a food forest garden, which is one of my passions of life, is food forestry. A food forest is a self-sustaining food system that's based on a forest. As we know, forests don't need any type of intervention. We don't need to do anything to a forest, right? Forests are in alignment with the circle of life. And every year they grow up and they fall down, and the cycle of regeneration in a forest is taken care of. We don't have to come in and bring compost or water the forest. It takes care of it itself. So that's the type of garden we're in, or forest we're in. We're in a self-sustaining food forest, let's say, because I love to talk about food. And we'll actually talk about food forests as well later in this course in more detail. But let's put ourselves in the garden, and it is March 20th, the beginning of spring in the northern hemisphere. If you're in the southern hemisphere, opposite, right? But in the Northern Hemisphere, we're sitting in the garden and it's March 20th, and there is a particular energy in the garden. And this is the beginning of the astrological year. We find Aries pushing through the cold dirt of wintertime, beginning its new life cycle. Imagine being in the garden, on the garden floor, and you see a brand new plant resurfacing, pushing itself through the cold earth from wintertime. That new plant has a fervor to exist and to survive that no other plant will feel at any other time of the year. This is the energy of Aries. Aries begins a new circle by beginning a new life cycle. And so Aries starts off our circle of life at the beginning of spring, cardinal fire, the beginning energy that has enough to take action to start that push through the dirt. Because imagine what it's like to be a plant underneath the dirt, and you've been underneath the dirt, as we'll talk about, throughout winter time. It's cold. There's not a whole lot of sun yet above. We actually are now in the equinox days, so it's equal light and equal dark. So there's enough sun, but there still isn't the summer sun. It's wet, and you've kind of been in a stagnant position underneath the earth and the dirt. Well, the energy of Aries is activated because of the sun. The sun is now spending equal amounts of time over the earth of light and also of dark. And because the way that the sun is working during the beginning of spring and the amount of light that it uses to touch, that actually touches the earth, the plants get a signal. They get a message that it's time to grow. And this is the message that Aries receives through the burning fire of spring. It springs forth out of the ground, and it has one sole mission. That is to preserve itself, to survive whatever life has to throw at it. And this is the foundation of Aries. Aries is associated to self-regulation, to the journey of the self, to the beginning of one's journey and the focus and the dedication and the commitment to oneself that we have to have in order to complete a whole life. Oftentimes, Aries energy is tended to be connected to selfishness or self-serving. But when we realize that this is a very delicate time of the year in the garden and on the earth, this is a time of the year that if you're not focused on yourself and you're not invested in your own pathway and you don't have the fire and commitment to get that done, you won't actually be able to survive the whole year. And so we tend to find Aries that live in alignment with this deep need to survive and to thrive no matter what is happening in the environment. In Aries season, there is still quite a bit of moisture from spring or from winter time, from the melting ice or melting cool weather. And that circle of actually really the cycle of water is what we're talking about. But for the most part during Aries season, the focus is the sun stimulating the senses of the plants and of the beings that, hey, guess what, guys? I'm getting ready to return. You're going to have ample amount of energy to grow from me. This is the message of the sun. and let's start going. Let's start growing. So Aries starts off the year and starts off the astrological year with a determination to develop and to act and to make things happen that no other sign knows. This is the energy of the warrior. This is the energy of a fearless being that doesn't even consider what the future could hold and whether or not it's challenging to survive. Aries is going to make it. The next sign of the zodiac is Taurus. And what we're really discussing when we talk about the zodiac is the consistent shifting of the sun along the ecliptic and how it interacts with the environment. So in Aries season, the sun stimulates the plant's growth and says, hey, little plant, grow up. It's time for you to sprout up out of the ground, grow big and strong, establish your place on the earth. Aries grows deep roots and grows a strong stem and grows up towards the sun and really sets its foundation down because there's no one else to do it for them. But then we move into Taurus season. And remember, this is fixed earth. This is the fixed sign of spring. So in between the beginning of spring, the new takeoff of spring, and as before we move into summer, we have Taurus. Now in this part of the season, it's almost perfect around the entire Earth on the northern hemisphere during Taurus season. The sun is continued to move and creep and spend a little bit more and more time in our sky every day. There's more moisture being absorbed, so there's less heaviness or heavy water on the earth, less water pouring down in the sky, right? April showers bring May flowers. So by the time we get to Taurus season, it's mostly dried up, but we still have enough moisture, right? We're not in summer. It's not the dog days of summer yet. We still have moisture, but it's kind of like this perfect amount of sun and moisture. And the plants get the message. They realize, wait a minute, I no longer have to worry about setting my ground. I have it here. I have my foundation. Now that I'm established and my roots are strong and I have a good establishment here on the earth, it's time for me to think about the future. Taurus season, we open our minds out from just thinking about ourselves and we tune into investing in our future, mostly through our offspring, through children. This is the time of year that babies are born all over the place. Animals wake up out of hibernation to either bring their babies out for the first time, or some animals actually even choose to have sex at this time to create babies for the summer as well. In the garden, this is the time of abundance of all things Tauran. We have amazingly beautiful flowers that are a range of all the different colors of the rainbows that are everywhere. I mean, I can remember being in my food forest garden at one point in a Taurus season and recognize I had over 30 different types of flowers all blooming at the exact same time during the season of Taurus. Taurans tend to be addicted to rich colors and fresh smells, strong, fresh, pungent smells, and soft fabrics and the beautiful things of life. Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is the planet of beauty and the planet of the recognition and the honoring of the beautiful time of life. Because during Taurus season, like I said, everything's pretty much perfect when it comes to the environment. The sun is not putting a huge amount of pressure on us yet, and the rain is not drowning us out. So in the garden, we decide to set our flowers, and we set our flowers and we draw in the early pollinators that have been hatching during this time, right? More sun, less water. So we have more bugs that are available during Taurus season. Most of the bugs in Aries season were still sleeping. And so there wasn't much need for there weren't many pollinators to do anything. But by Taurus season, we have an abundance of pollinators waiting for flowers to intermingle with, to take their pollen and move it around and make some baby plants. Which is what we see, right? We see these flowers, they get pollinated, and then they set seed. And that seed is the actual genetic information of this being. So right in the beginning of the year, we have reproduction taking a priority. And the only reason is because of the environment itself. If we attempted to make seeds and set seeds in the middle of the summer when the sun is blazing above head, the seeds might not survive. They might not actually have enough time to be able to move to a place that is healthy for them to be able to be reborn next year. They might get burned up. They might not have the actual protection to be able to survive. And so the plants and all of us are in tune with what the sun is doing and know that Taurus season is when we're going to set this seed. It also brings us into the reality that Taurus has a lot to do with the home and the foundation and nourishing and protecting the home and the foundation. Taurus is aware of its value. It knows that this is the perfect time of the year. And so there is no reason for us to abandon this perfect time. There's no reason for us to look for some other time. What we should really be focused in on Taurus and during Taurus season is our own foundation and nourishing it and providing a healthy, safe, and strong foundation for our children to grow from. And that's the foundation of Taurus. We then are going to move into the third sign of spring, and that is Gemini. Gemini season is mutable air. And so we come into Gemini season, and again, what has the sun been doing Every day. We've talked about it. Every single day, the sun is slowly moving into the next position. And actually, at this point, we're going from the sun at the equinox position, slowly moving to the highest peak of the sky, that northeastern rising. Excuse me. That northeastern rising, okay? So we're somewhere in between this on the spectrum of the sun's or on the ecliptic. But not quite yet at the total northeast, right? So Gemini season is when there's more sun every day, and so there's less water. The majority of the water of the spring has been evaporated by this time. It's getting warmer, and a lot more animals and bugs are active during Gemini season. This is like that special, perfect moment right before summertime when it seems like the temperature is like, 79 to 83 every day. You're feeling extremely comfortable and relaxed. There's not a lot of pressure because all of the investments have already taken place in spring. So now it comes to Gemini season, and Gemini is known as the energy and is connected to the planet Mercury, which is the planet of communication. This is the time where we've now set our ground. We have a strong foundation. We've now invested our energy and our attention into strengthening that foundation, into investing into our home by birthing the next generation. And now the sun is drying up the land even more. The seeds are now ready on the plant. The petals have fallen off of the plant, off of the flower, and we just see the seeds. And now we have, more bears and land mammals walking around, and we have people moving and shifting. It's not cold anymore. There's a lot of sun. This is the time of abundance and of plenty. Most of us love the spring, as the spring transitions into the summer. It's right before the best time of year. And it has a lot to do with the fact that this is the season of communication. The genetic information that was established during the season of Taurus is now ready to move, to spread, to do its job and spread its DNA, its information around. And that's where we find Gemini. We find Gemini during the time of the winds of spring. The winds of spring come in and start to move the little light, soft, airy seeds around. This is the time when burdock is going to be usually quite a challenge in your garden if you have a big old burdock plant growing there. Of course, you definitely want to use burdock. It's a super healer that we'll talk about later, but it's this huge growing plant that has airy light seed packets that are kind of sticky, or thistle even as well. These plants have sticky seeds. When you walk past them, they might get caught on your clothes or on your fur if you were a bear or some land mammal walking around. And so it's because of the fact that the sun is out, but not too much. There's still a little bit of water, but not too much, that everybody is moving around and interacting in all of the different ways that life like to interact. This is the time where the energy has gone into our minds and into thinking, well, I have my foundation, I set my seed, my babies are here, and the head kind of almost, we've kind of been down here looking at what we're doing, what we're creating. And in Gemini season, we pick our head up and we look around and we're like, wow, there are a lot of other beings in the garden. This is a garden full of other beings or other people or other plants to talk to. And Gemini has one thing on their mind: go talk. Go spread what you know. Go spread the lessons of growing, of establishing yourself, of the beautiful, balanced energy of Taurus season, of how to create new life. A lot of us that are parents realize that you kind of don't learn much about, how to be yourself until you become a parent, until you have to show up and be responsible for another being every single day before you're responsible for yourself. That's some real lessons that the Zodiac shows us. If you don't have that figured out, it's not time for you to worry about the rest of the world. But by Gemini season, it's time to worry about the rest of the world. It's time to move those seeds around and that information around. Gemini is also associated to the dark and the light. This is the dark and light. This is the first dualistic sign. There are 3 signs in the Zodiac that are in alignment with the dark and the light and know both sides. Gemini is the first. And the way in which I like to direct people to seeing this in the real world is that, so again, the sun has created a perfect environment. That dirt that was cold, that Aries had to have the courage to break through, is now warmed up. The dirt is warm, and the life in the dirt has gotten really, really active. So what we're, the entire circle of life, everything that we're talking about on Earth, there's always going to be two sides to everything. And really three. There's always a neutral center, right? The neutral center is where both sides come out of. But you're going to have a left and a right. We have our above Earth experience, and we also have a below Earth experience. And most of us are in tune with what's going on above Earth. But when we start to talk about the dirt and the underworld and the things that are happening underneath our feet, that's when it starts to get really magical, but less of us pay attention to this. Gemini is totally tuned in to what's happening above in the light world and what's happening below in the dark world. The earth, the dirt has warmed up, and the entire community of the dirt and of the underworld has woken up. They've been asleep throughout the spring when it was cold and wet. Most of the bugs and the mycelium, which is the fungi that actually grows mushrooms, have either slowed down, went into hibernation, or even a lot of them even died, and the new seeds or the new eggs were being born for the next year. Well, by the time we get to Gemini season, most of that underground network has woken up. They're communicating again. The bugs and the larvae and the worms are moving around freely again. They're pooping in the dirt and feeding the dirt. They are interconnecting with the roots and with each other and sharing information. Mycelium is the actual being, the living being that grows mushrooms. And I think I've heard about a new Netflix mushroom documentary that's going around, and I'm so happy that people are watching this, because as long as we have mushrooms on the earth, like, we're going to be okay. Mushrooms are the decomposers of earth. They can actually even break down petroleum oil and allow it to be recycled. So the mycelium under the ground has woken back up. And mycelium is a microscopic only, but you can actually see it. It's little white stringy stuff under the earth. But it's so thin and permeable that it actually can grow through the roots of plants. And as it grows through those roots of plants, it shares its knowledge, its resources with the community. Mycelium actually interconnects the entire underworld and is what Gemini is tuned into. Gemini is able to communicate and be a part of the communication of the underworld through the knowledge and the movement and the action of mycelium and all the beings and critters that live under there, as well as in communication with that which is happening on top of the ground as well. So this is the natural dualistic experience of Gemini. And again, it is literally based on the season and what the sun is doing and allowing the beings on the earth to experience at that time. All right, so this concludes our conversation on the spring. We're gonna go ahead and move into the summer season, starting off with Cancer. So I'll see you guys in the next class. Peace.